Before we begin our saga of stolen identity, would you believe the music you're hearing is by an experimental band named Frege?
Part of music, of language itself, is what attracted us to the philosopher.
Raphael Durand plays the keyboard. He says he was reading Frege's Sense and Reference.
At the beginning of the band, we were very inspired by that, and we started to look for these truths that were just above our subjectivity, like extra subjective truths within music. For example, the octave, the first C note, middle C note, how it relates to the next one. It's not simply a matter of subjectivity. It's not like arbitrarily you call this one C and this one C an octave above. It has a kind of a scientific relationship, like a degree of undisputable truth.
I'll hold you. I'll hold you close. I'll hold you. I'll hold you close.
Now, about those stolen identities.
You'd see depictions of a dangerous person wearing a tan trench coat and a hat hiding in the bushes.
Axton Betts Hamilton grew up in the 80s when they taught ideas like stranger danger.
In my 11-year-old mind, that's what I thought an identity thief looked like.
Axton is a professor of consumer affairs at South Dakota State University. She grew up in a small rural community in Indiana called Portland.
I grew up surrounded by cornfields, and we had animals and, pretty typical rural Indiana life.
But then unusual things started happening. Her grandfather passed away when she was 11, and her family's mail went missing.
Our mail was delivered to a large yellow metal mailbox out by the road, and my parents just thought, somebody's driving by and stealing the mail.
The personal information in their mail was used to obtain credit cards, bank accounts, and commit utilities fraud. Axton's mom drafted a list of suspects, family members who seemed to be spending more than their means.
It seemed reasonable, and it seemed like there were all of these people in our lives that just weren't behaving in ways that they should, and somehow all of these people were just surrounding us.
Axton's mom worked in the financial industry and had gone to college, so she and her dad trusted her to have the answers. This was before credit freezes and fraud alerts, so there weren't a whole lot of solutions. The family just withdrew and stopped going into people's homes or family gatherings.
The world pretty much became me, mom, and dad.
By the time Axton was 19, she learned her credit score was in the second lowest percentile in the nation.
It affected my ability to obtain utility services, so, basic things like electricity and water and phone service and things like that.
Axton decided to study identity theft in graduate school because she wanted to address the lack of support and understanding she experienced as a victim. She says research shows that parents are the most common perpetrators of identity theft, but that didn't enter her mind as a possibility until February 2013. It was 13 days after her mom had died from leukemia.
My dad was in an outbuilding on their property and was going through an old file box of mom's, and he calls me and he's just livid at me for running a credit card over limit in 2001. I said, Dad, what credit card is it? He said, well, it's First USA. And I said, well, Dad, that's one of the credit cards that was taken out in my name as part of the identity theft. What's Mom doing with that?
Her dad explained the statement was there along with Axton's birth certificate. And that's when Axton's blood ran cold. She understood her mom was the person who had stolen their identities. She says the process of grieving her mom's death stopped there.
The best way I can explain it is, how can you grieve for somebody that you clearly didn't know? And it's very clear that there were several dimensions to Mom that I didn't know and that clearly Dad didn't know either. I'm not sure anybody really knew who my mother was.
Axton later wrote a book about identity theft titled The Less People Know About Us. She says there is an irony here. Her own identity now revolves around studying the crimes her mom committed. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Holly J. McDeed.